our lead eyes. Now, there's one final step. Once you get these stirrup wraps made, we want to tighten them down even more. So I'm going to bring my thread up above the hook, and then with horizontal wraps above the hook shaft, I'm going to wrap around.
There's a message box over here now.
Okay. With the thread above the hook shaft, I'm going to wrap around, keeping the thread on top all the time, basically cinching down those wraps around that eye. And now that eye is not going anywhere. You don't need glue for it. You can put glue on it if you like, but you really don't need glue or anything on it. Those stirrup wraps plus that cinch wrap, horizontal cinch wrap, will tighten it down. Good. All right. While you're finishing the eye, once you finish your eye, take your thread back to the rear of the hook. And I'm going, we normally stop our thread wrap about the bend of the hook, but here I'm going to take it back a little bit farther, all the way back about halfway between the barb and the rear of the hook. So I'm quite a ways down the bend of the hook in the back. And this will be important because when we tie in those antennae and the eyes and all that, we want them really off the back of the crawfish. Thank you. Is there pheasant? Yeah. All right, so once you get your thread to the back, let's bring it back forward to about the hook point, somewhere in that range. So I have a thread base down into the bend of the hook, then my thread is hanging at the hook point. Now, our next step is to tie in 6 or 8 pheasant tail fibers as antenna for the crawfish. And so I'm going to grab some, and you don't want too many of these. I mean, if you look at crawfish, they really don't have, I think they only have 2 antennae, but we want a few more than that just to give it a little bit of more visibility in the front. Now, so I have probably 8 or 10 here, and I'm going to trim. I've stripped them off the tail. I'm going to just trim those off. Now, we don't want to tie them in like this because this doesn't look like antenna. It looks like a clump of feathers. So we want to spread these out, kind of just run your thumbnail across those and of them out in different directions, out just to try to fluff that out. I'm going to do it off, get my hands on it. The little foot, trim that off. Yeah. And your thumbnail over it, and they'll stand, look a little bit more like an ant. And so probably at least length from the back about there, and so I'm going to trim it off. It doesn't matter. I trim some of that off, and then I'm going to take and then I'm going to wrap back thread base. My thread back up where it was. And these all look, flies different. You can, they get in the water, they'll. Already 3 on over there too. Looks good so far, but doesn't yet look like a crawfish. So our next material is the black Antron yarn that you have, and you only need about 1.25 inches of it. You can always trim it, but a piece about 1.25 inches long is fine. And I tie it in just directly on top of the pheasant tail. So just right where I tied the pheasant tail in, tie in that Antron. And it usually helps to hold it toward you as you wrap to keep the side of the hook. And we want to wrap that back to the back of that thread base. And that's why I wanted to wrap my thread back to this point in the beginning, because that kind of gives me a marker for the back of my body. Each time I tie those materials in, I want to wrap those back all up. Again, bring it back forward once that forward to about the hook point. Okay, how we doing out there? Good? Come along. Mark, Chris, Peter, Jeff, Tom.
Yeah, audio is pretty good, a little in and out, but I'm following.
Yep, doing much better than it
Our
was.
library center. We talked to our club for the library. All right. Eyes and which one of the small one better? Okay, the guys one and one large. So your second copy. Now the nice thing about eyes is they squared shaft is really not right on top of our hook. Well, so those eyes to bend, you can see they're just.
Are those the large or small eyes?
On Peter, whichever.
Okay.
Large right now.
Okay.
Just take a couple of thread wraps. Stick them back a little past the bend. See, here's there. Eventually have body of the crawfish all the way up against that. So we want that to stand out in the rear. So as you steady those, take thread wraps over the top, back to that Y. And then forward and let your thread hang just in front of the eye. Okay. I'm just cleaning that up. Okay. Yeah, the eyes going on. Now, the next material is our cross-cut rabbit strip. And folks on Zoom, yours may be a little short because I only tied one copy of that when I sent yours, and I since tied a little bit different than that. So if you run out of rabbit palmering before you get up to the eyes, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll show you how to correct that once we get to the dubbing phase. But looking at the rabbit strip, and I think each of you have a half strip. Is that right? Okay. You have a half of one of these cross. as I mentioned earlier, look at the hair is running to the left off the palm or this. So we back. So we in that we that fur. First thing that we want to do about 3/8.
I'm missing the audio.
Long. We want to off about 3. Let me wait just a second for the internet. Peter, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you again.
Okay, good. I saw you freeze for a second, so I paused. So we have about 3/8 of an inch here of fur pulled off that. And we want to, with looking down on the strip, with the hair pointing downward, we want to tie that bear hide in right on top of those eyes. Now, one thing that's important here is to don't wrap all the way back to here. Stop your wrapping somewhere in here. You want a little bit of that hide, 1/16 of an inch or so. You want a little bit of it that does not have thread wraps on it, because that's going to let us bend it and begin wrapping it. If we wrap it too far back, it won't palmer correctly. So cinch that down really nicely. Take a few thread wraps forward and back. And then if you have some type of material clip to clip that back with, something like, I use these little hair clips, that would be helpful. If not, it'll just be in the way a little bit, but it'll be fine. So you notice I've tied in about where the front of those eyes, the base of those eyes were, and I wrapped it back, and I have about a 1/16 of an inch there of bear hide left. Okay, and we'll pause right there for just a second. And as you're tying that in, I'm just going to talk about the legs a bit, is that we want the legs to splay out to the side, kind of like crawfish claws do. And so we're going to use a technique to push those legs out to the side once we tie them in. And this little batch of, or little short section of hide plays an important role there. Is that Bruce? Look right? Yep. Okay. All right, legs. And I'm using Hairline's barred and speckled legs, and you should have 10 legs. Now what, it makes it far, far easier to tie this if you leave the legs attached here. And what you want to do, we want 5 strands. We gave you 10, but that's enough, 10 or 11, that's enough to tie 2 copies. But we want 5 strands. Is that 5 or 4? That's 5. And like I say, peel it where, if you can, it stays, that base keeps the strands together. It just makes it easier to handle. Okay. So now I have my 5 rubber leg strands. Okay, take our thread back to actually the hook itself, right at the front of where we tied the rabbit in. Yep. And there are a number of ways to do this. You could tie, what we're going to do is we're going to tie in legs down each side of the fly. like this. You can tie them, if you prefer to tie them in one side at a time, but what I like to do is I like to wrap in front of the thread and hold it like so. So I've wrapped my legs under the hook shank in front of the thread and holding it up at a slight angle. And then all I have to do is take a few wraps right now. I don't want to wrap very far back. Kind of hold it down with my finger and take a few wraps right at the front. And now my legs are secured. Now we're not finished with them yet, but they're secured where they're roughly even on each side of the hook. I'm going to turn my vise where you can see the top. Yep, and Bruce, just hold them in that left hand and then take a couple of wraps of thread right over that base. Now I want to make sure I keep half these on each side, because if you don't pay attention here, and I know because I did a couple of copies where I didn't pay attention here, and those legs aren't even on both sides, your claws aren't going to look right at the end. So turn my vise around where you're actually looking down on my fly. And what I like to do is just grab both strands with my fingers and put my index finger between them. And that way I can just pull and stretch them down each side. It's like this, just give them a little stretch. Now, before you wrap it all the way back, I want you to stop. Make sure you don't go any farther back than that thread where we tied that rabbit hide in. Don't go any farther back with your thread. And you can kind of maneuver them around a little bit if you like. And I'm actually going to stop a little bit short of that.
So the rabbit's supposed to be down between them?
Yep.
And how far back do you go with the rabbit?
I went back to about right there, Jim.
You covered up most of that?
Most of that hide on that rabbit. Yeah.
Most of that-
Yeah, but I've got a little bit left right here.
So we,
Yeah, let me do a little close, get a little closer here for you.
You just have to take it next year.
Finger gymnastics.
Enjoy this,
Finger gymnastics, yeah. And so we don't trim the legs at this point. They're just kind of both hanging right there. And again, it's not critical, but just stop your thread somewhere. Make sure you don't get back into this part of don't get back into there. We want to save that bare hide in the back. Okay, let me zoom back out just a little bit. Now the real finger dexterity comes now. Oh, we'll stop for a second. Other folks are tying legs on. Jeff, how are you? How you doing over there? Good. Yeah, they can be. They can be.
They don't know where you put them.
no, they want to.
They want to run up the hole there.
Once you get them around the thread, pinch them, sort of pinch them down, you know, behind the,
Oh, I got you. That's probably.
behind the thread, you can kind of get a
I got you.
gain.
And some
And then you
revise, rotate it where the hook. Don't have a rotary vise and put it in. They were fun to tie in, but the is I am. All right. Pre-cut furry. Cut it rough. I cut it roughly the width of the hook. And we want really steep angle. We don't want sloping cut. We want. I cut it. It's about a 40. Actually, it's probably like 40. So furry foam 20 on one end.
Here for 2 flies.
All right, yep, you do. You can fold in half. Sorry about that. Mine's already cut. Now I struggle with me how to do it, so we probably this, but know that the furry foam has a side or a side, but just look at it. Piece looks a little broad on this side. If any, look toward the hook on it. The bright. We tie it in. That's what's going.
What's the length of the piece? How long should
Yeah.
be the hook? The length of the shank?
If you'll cut that, it'll be about right. Is if it with back of our tie hanging there, the base for my thread. And I'm going to hold it on the side like this. And this is probably the most aggravating part of the fly. You want to take a loose wrap with that thread right over that point and let it roll it on top, and then slightly tug down and let it roll on top of the hook. And so that kind of rolled it, not all the way, but most of the way on top of the hook. And then I'll take another wrap, and then I may even have to twist it a little bit, and I want it tucked up in that bend of that hook like that. And then with it tucked up in there, I'm going to finish wrapping over, actually, I'm going to pull it off to the side. Once I have it lined, I'm going to finish wrapping over that point. And so that point is now tied down, and that furry foam is kind of tucked up in under the bend of the hook. And you can see how that forms the back of the crawfish. So once you get it tied in, I want to show you how to kind of adjust that rear portion of it a little bit. You got it in, Cindy? All right, cool. So once you have it tied in, if you pull it forward, you'll notice that mine is actually not tied in far enough back yet. Because see, the back of it's here. I actually want it about here. So what I'm going to do is, is that you, Peter?
Nope.
Oh, okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that foam back into the bend of the hook. And I'm going to wrap some thread. This is kind of, again, some of that finger gymnastics. I'm going to try to wrap some thread and get the back of that foam tied a little farther back. Yeah, about like that. That's fine. See, it's a little farther back toward the rear now than it was. Now, once it's tied in, what I like to do here is just impale it on that hook point. So that'll kind of hold it out of the way for me. All right. Next, we're going to palmer that rabbit all the way forward. So I'm going to move my thread, just wide spiral wraps, move my thread up to behind my barbell eyes. And turn the hook back over. All right. Now, I want to make one wrap of this rabbit behind my legs. And by doing that, forward down each side of the hook shank and making sure that hair is pointed to the rear, I make one wrap and make sure you go inside, the furry foam. I'll make one wrap behind the legs and then go between the legs. Now what I've done here, I've made one wrap behind. I've just gone up and holding it straight up. And then I make a wrap between the legs and then pull my legs. Whoops, sorry about that. Excuse me. Slip, go between them and pull my legs back and start making touching wraps. And if you do it, if you've done it right, the legs will stick out almost straight with a little rearward sweep to them.
You don't go between them the first time.
Just behind it.
Yep, just once behind it. All right.
Pull your little legs out here. Your side, wrap behind it. And then make your.
Yeah, kind of what you go between to get to the front of it, and then wrap forward to just behind the barbell eyes,
Legs don't go there. So your legs stay like that.
like that,
Go behind it, right?
and then tie off.
This way.
That way. That there. Yeah, and then go in between it.
And we trim that tag end of that fur off.
And then what happens after you go in between it?
I'll start wrap against the front edge of them.
So one, let's see if it says wrap to the front.
What's in it?
Like the skin of the rabbit?
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay.
Once we tie the, do what?
Getting the skin covered up on the fur.
Yeah, I can see from this angle, I can see mine, but once we put the foam over it, it'll sweep back.
You supposed to go to the front or to the back?
To the front.
All the way up to the eye.
Yeah, all the way up to the barbell eyes. Yeah.
My philosophy is if they're hungry enough, they want to start it on the front, we go on the top way. Going to the back.
What's that, Jim? No, it's not. No, it's not. So now once we've tied that off, sweep the rabbit fur back with your fingers and then wrap the thread over it to bind some of it down. You don't have to do touching wraps, but wrap the thread over it and stop just about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch in front of the hook point. And then go back forward.
Back to the end of your fur.
Yeah, that's the end. Got it all.
No, it's
Back to the end of the fur back.
What's that, Cindy?
I'm just looking at this. Cut off a little- cut off a little light strap.
Now, I'll show you a copy of the fly. This is one.
Cut off just that much.
Notice what we just did should make your legs kind of splay out to the side like this copy. That's what it should wind up. When we finish the fly, that's what those legs should wind up looking like, something like that. Now, if you don't like all that wrapping in front of and behind, and just want to wrap over the legs, you can do that, but they just kind of hang straight like that. So I like that forward and back. So now we have thread back to just in front of the hook point and forward. We kind of bound down some of that rabbit. Now we want to, what we're going to do now is dub over this body. We're going to dub over this from the eyes all the way back to that fur. So we're going to make a dubbing noodle and whoops, sorry about that, guys. We're going to make a dubbing noodle and dub over that section. So we want about 4 inches there. Yep. We want a dubbing noodle that's about 4 inches long. And even though it's a fairly long and not a real thin dubbing noodle, we don't want to put too much on at one time. So just a little bit of that dubbing on at one time. We can always add more if you don't have enough. So that's about 4 inches. So we'll see how that works. So I'll start wrapping my dubbing. Just making touching wraps with that dubbing, trying to keep that body about roughly even. If it's a little larger at the back, that's actually a good thing. So there's my dubbed body. And leave that thread hanging right at the rear of your dubbing. Yep, right up against the fur, right up against the rabbit fur. You see why we're tying one copy of this tonight instead of two? Now, once you get the dubbing, invert your hook again. Invert your hook. Let me zoom back out. And we're in the home stretch now. We're like at the exit ramp. Did you wrap your dubbing yet?
Yeah.
Yep. So, and leave your thread hanging at the back of the dubbing. If it's fuzzy, don't worry about it because we're actually going to wrap thread forward, which will smooth it out. So if it's kind of, see, mine's kind of fuzzy and.
A combination of a housefly and a crawfish right now.
Well, let's hope it finishes up closer to the well, the housefly might work if it's big enough. Okay. Now pull that. Well, reach under with your fingers, and we want to sweep and hold back that fur with our left hand, and then pull. And we want it roughly evenly distributed on both sides. So it should be, at first, should be roughly even, kind of like mine is. It doesn't have to be exact. But as I find it easier to reach under the hook and hold that fur back and pull that forward. And now I can hold the foam, and right where my thread is, make a loose wrap, a second loose wrap, and then tighten it up. And you see we now have the back of that carapace of our crawfish. And make 3 or 4 wraps there, should be plenty. What's that, Cindy? Hold it forward, and right where you thread, and hold it forward, and grab the foam like with your left or your right, your left-handed. So with your right hand, grab the foam, and then right where the thread is, make a couple of loose wraps, and then cinch it down, and then make a couple of tighter wraps. And that gives you that first segment of the body.
Extend and pass the head up, right?
It,
Whatever that is.
no, don't worry about where this is laying right now. All we're worried about is this back segment. Yeah, we're just wrapping right here. And once you get that wrapped, hold the foam back out of the way and take open spiral wraps forward to halfway between where you wrap this thread and the eye and the barbell eyes. So my thread's hanging roughly halfway there. And then I do the same thing over again. I pull the foam forward, take my material hand, hold it, take a couple of loose wraps, tighten them, and a couple of tight wraps. And now I've formed my second body segment. Take the thread halfway between your first wraps and the dumbbell eyes, the back of the dumbbell eyes. And once you've made that second segment, take your thread forward to against the back of the dumbbell eyes. Don't go in front of them yet, but against the back of the dumbbell eyes. So now I'm leaving my thread here at the back of the dumbbell eyes. And of course, we're going to make the third segment now. So I pull that forward, hold it, take a couple of loose wraps, a couple of tighter wraps, and I've formed my third, whoops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to bump the camera. I formed my third body segment.
I bet that's the tail sticking out.
Yep, and once you have that third segment, take your thread in front of the barbell eyes and let it hang there. And then I'm going to take the tip of my scissors because I want to make a hole in this foam. So I stretch it up, and to go over the eye, stretch it up, and right about the eye of the hook, I just use my scissors and make a hole in the foam. And then stretch the foam over the eye. And through that hole I made. So that's where we are now. We only have a couple of more steps and we're finished. All right, just like we made the back 3 sections, we're going to make one final section here right in front of those eyes. Now this one will want to twist on you, so you have to kind of work with it. A couple of loose wraps, working with it to keep it fairly straight. And then our last step before whip finishing is we trim the furry foam right in front of the eye of the hook. So I have 4 body segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the tail of the crawfish. You can grab your whip finish tool or hand whip finish, whichever you prefer. And give it a 4 or 5 turn whip finish, and we're done. And you can certainly put a little cement on there, cement if you like, but I'm not going to. Now, last step of the fly, once you whip finish, is to trim your legs, and I'll hold up for a second here. Yeah, that's where this kind of comes in handy, Bruce. Those little small hair clip, or whatever size that is, tiny ones, but little bitty ones.
You just whip finish it around the, where you tied the last.
Yep.
Segment in.
Yep, and then trim it off right in front of the hook eye. And then as far as trimming the legs, we want to leave them long. So we only want to trim off that base section that holds them together. And that's pretty much it. Just trim that off, and hopefully they will hang at some type of an angle here, kind of like that. And that is our crawfish pattern. Your first one takes you 30 minutes or so to tie it. It gets down to about 10 to 15 minutes for each one once you've done a few of them.
Do you brush out that dubbing in?
I don't, and Darren didn't as well. He this is the actual copy he tied, Jim, that I'm holding above mine, and it looks.
So Bill, this is gonna ride hook side up?
Peter,
This is gonna
hang on.
ride hook up?
Sorry, is this thing.
The fly's gonna ride hook side up or hook side down?
Yeah, it'll ride it. Now, if I don't know that it will light.
Can't hear you.
It should ride point.
It should ride point up.
Hear me, Peter?
It's gonna ride hook point up.
Yes.
Yep. Boom, you should have enough copy of that. Because the second one. That's pretty much it. Tied a lot of crawfish pads. How'd yours go?